these are the kind of questions I ask you. So if you pay attention, you'll know the answers. I told you, right? Absence of injury makes the food safe. So it's a relative term. It's in relation to the cause and effect, okay? And it's individual based. There's also, if same food is given to 100 people, you're going to have some that are more effective, some that are less effective. It's going to follow a normal distribution, okay? And also, if you take infants versus children versus adults, there's going to be differences because of age. So that's why it's a relative term, it's not an absolute term. And food laws and regulations are periodically examined and evaluated and amended, true or false? It's a true statement, right? You have the 1938 Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which we're going to know today. But again, there are a lot of amendments added, including the FESMA changes, because as time goes by, we have new technologies, we learn new things about old things, and then we revise it. These are called amendments, okay? So that way we update our information. It is better to have preventive. People use preventative. I like the word preventive. Food safety program than end product testing to ensure food safety. What do you think? Why can't companies manufacture food and then look at the final product, let's say your baked product you make or flour or animal feed, why can't you just test that and prove to the world that it is safe so you don't have to have all these programs?
You have to test everything that you make?
Well, that's one too, because you don't know how that physical chemical hazard is distributed in your products. Not maybe only a few boxes may be affected, or a few packages, or a few limited amount of the product. But what is implicit in that though? Why is people used to do that before? They did end product testing and said, you know, out of a bag you can't test every single thing, right? Because you got to have something to sell. And typically it's a sampling issue. You can only take a portion of it and test. You can't test all of it. So the question here is, why is it not better to test the end products rather than have all these programs and preventive things on the front end? And I'll tell you why. If you look at some of the food safety recalls, salmonella recall with Maltomeal up in 1990, they had salmonella in their Maltomeal products. They went back and tried to find problems. Just imagine, how many of you watch Forensic Files? So I'm a big fan of Forensic Files because it has a lot of science in it. And if you look at Forensic Files, all you have is like a dead body. Then they have to put pieces back together, right? Exactly what happened. And sometimes you're good at doing that. But if you know from the beginning what had happened, if somebody videotaped, you know exactly what had happened, right? Same thing with the food safety. You have all these programs, policies, and how people are doing things. But once you have a food safety problem, Maltomeal went back, hired consultants, spent millions of dollars, couldn't figure out where the problem started because they didn't have a preventive food safety problem. You know, if you're checking at receiving, you can say at receiving, these are my issues. Once I'm conveying, you look at conveying system, these are my issues. When you're looking at manufacturing processes, these are my issues, what you're adding. See, if you compartmentalize your whole production from raw material to the final product, you can identify which compartment has the issue and deal with it, right? That's exactly is what HACCP does for you. So preventive food safety, grassroots approach always best, okay? Knowing exactly what happened from the beginning to the end rather than end going back to the beginning. You'll never find it. And this is true with anything. If you have a final product trying to figure out where it happened, when it happened, you have to use deductive logic, right? And you may not know all the answers. That's why documentation is very important in this kind of thing. So, and you can go back to some food safety problems and take a look at that. Food laws and regulations have to be customized to make them process and product specific, and that is true. Okay? Because we do not, there are so many million ways of doing different products, so the government gives you general guidelines and they have to customize it. And then the risks are again product and process specific. Okay, we talked about different regulatory agencies, and I'll tell you, all agencies come together. If you have, I've been involved in a court case with a pesticide rescue with General Mills, Cheerios, way back in 1991. They lost $180 million because they hired this contractor who came and applied a wrong chemical on oats that came from Canada. They don't treat oats in Canada, so all of the 3 shipments of oats, we're talking about several million bushels, came to Lake Superior, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and I was in Minnesota at the time. and they were stored in their elevators, 110,000 bushels a piece, about 60 silos, and they hired this guy to treat it with a compound called chlorpyrifos methyl, which is approved for use on oats in the U.S. Instead, the guy applied chlorpyrifos ethyl. Methyl, ethyl, what is the difference? CH3 versus C2H5, right? Carbon and hydrogen atoms. But then, they made all of this oats went on the rail cars to different processing, General Mills processing plants. Okay? And they made it into Cheerios, different brands of Cheerios, sold on the store shelves for over a year. So, in Gerber Foods, a year later, you know, some FDA inspectors went to Gerber Foods in Iowa, and they were looking at these oats, and then they found this illegal residue. They said, hey, where did this chemical come from? And then they notified General Mills, and they backtracked it, and they found out the contractor they hired to apply this chemical had basically used the wrong chemical, and of course he used the postal system to perpetuate his crime, so he got indicted on 13 counts of mail fraud because he false billed for applying the wrong chemical, one count of label violation, and one count of product adulteration. So he went to jail, he's still out there in jail. But General Mills, by this time, a year later, when they realized what this guy had done, they went, I mean, this was a landmark issue that changed how companies started looking at food safety problem. That was a very big food safety problem. And General Mills actually lost a lot of money, even insurance companies didn't cover it. So they did a lot of PR work and stuff, and had to rebrand Cheerios. They lost $180 million because they had to decontaminate every single facility, because when you went and looked at the residues, because by this time the grain went through all the processing equipment and all that, then they did swabbing, FDA and EPA did a lot of swabbing. If you want to look at this court case documents, they're in the Swanson Library. Okay? So I represented an insurance company against General Mills. I worked for the state prosecutor, with this guy. Then I worked for General Mills again, another insurance company. So all of the court documents are there if you want to look at depositions and stuff, if you want to follow that. But General Mills has lost a lot of things. You know, they didn't have a testing facility. They didn't have somebody who knew what they were doing and all that. So things could be costly, though. That's why in that particular case, EPA was involved and FDA was involved. Because FDA, because it involved residues in processed food, which should not be there. EPA was involved because they applied an illegal chemical to a raw commodity which should not have been applied. Okay? There was no risk to humans per se, but it is just not an illegal application. So when you think of places in a food company, FDA and OSHA can come together in case you have somebody falling and tripping because the company didn't have a guard or someplace, right? Or railing. So you can think of all the federal agencies work together depending on how it is. So I want you to think about some of those things. I'll give you a question about these kind of things. Define sanitation. What definition did I give you of sanitation? My holistic definition of sanitation was what?
All programs and practices followed to ensure that the raw and processed materials are free of physical, chemical, and biological.
That's correct. So that is the true definition of sanitation. The best source of information, I gave you the link, and then you can always go to the recalls.gov. Recalls basically means it's a food safety violation, something bad has happened, okay? When one company has something bad happen, the other companies that make similar products will pull the products back. With the peanut recall, you know, there's king nut peanut issue started, right? And so the company that made it in Alabama, Georgia, they pulled all the products back, but a lot of people were not buying any peanut products because they were afraid. They did not know from where the contamination came. They assumed that the company that was selling peanuts the peanuts in general had issues, so even if they had any peanut brands, they pulled it just to protect the consumers, okay? Even though their product did not have any food safety issues. So recalls could be based on real issues or a perceived issue, and companies will show due diligence and pull the product back just so that the consumers are not concerned. Okay? But all of this, again, affects the peanut farmers. They lost $1 billion that year. Okay? So they're all, go back to recalls. Recalls are published weekly. Okay? They're recalls about medical devices, food, feed. Okay? And then, of course, from your daily experience, can you list 3 things you do to ensure food safety in your own kitchen? Right? Cooking, checking, washing your hands. Okay? wearing gloves, not using sprouts. Many issues with Jimmy Johnson. So with that, I'm going to go to Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, and if anybody wants to read stuff, here you are, read this, okay, rather than leave it, okay, so I'm gonna ask you to read some sections. So Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, these are the learning outcomes. I mean, this document itself is huge, okay? I mean, there's several pages of this, and I gave you the links in here, okay? And I don't expect you to remember all of this stuff. I just want to tell you the basics of this Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act that was passed in 1938. And now if you look at the more recent document I linked, and if you go to the website, there's a whole bunch of amendments on the SMN. But I'll just give you some, this is a very basic presentation. I'll tell you where they made a few changes. And you need to understand, I mean, there's the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act governs everything, food, drugs, cosmetics, okay? Biologics and all that, but we're only talking a little bit about food. Okay, it has about total 9 chapters. The book, when it first came out, was about that thick, okay? About 150 pages, but now it's quite a bit based on all the amendments that were added to it. So it appears